Torin's Passage. Now, this was a fun game, and I remember I got it when it came out. I think shortly after it came out, it was a new release at the time. And part of my getting it was actually because I was a fan of Al Lowell, and I had a lot of his other games that he had released, or that Sierra had released, the Leisure Suit Larry series. And so I was expecting a nice, humorous, fun time with this one. Now, this was a change of pace in some ways because it was it was a rather more family-friendly title. Now, if you know Allo, the series he's most known for is Leisure Suit Larry, which is not aimed for young children or children. So this was one of the more family-friendly games he had made, or he was part of. And at the time, this is something I didn't know until later, it was actually supposed to be part of a bigger series, but well, things didn't go that way due to things happening at Sierra. But it's clever, using some of the humor that people my age grew up with, and humor that we can relate to, like older generations can relate to. As the game had a surreal look, and it was actually very also puzzle laden, that you actually had to do a lot of thinking and had to work your way through it. Now, like most other Sierra games, you could, of course, die, but things were designed so that you could resume where you made your mistake, or let's try that again, in a kind way, and it was also very humorous what he had done. Going through the quote nested worlds, which if you look at the box art, you can actually see representations of most of the worlds you go through in that game. And it was a genius in design. I mean, you could look at things up close and get a 3D view, showing the early days of three-dimensional images in games. It had a toon feel to it. And believe it or not, Torin was actually seen in some other games that in Leisure Suit Larry, Love for Sale. He was sort of like a cameo character. I don't know. I'm not recalling correctly if Torin's Passage came out before or after Leisure Suit Larry, Love for Sale. So this cameo could have been, cross merchandise plugging, for all I know. But that's how the game worked. Or that's how they would do things. These companies would do this. But the game was full of puzzles. Puzzles that you needed to think your way through as you played the games. Some were rather humorous due to what you had to get. Some were rather comical, and some were downright strange. Some could be frustrating. For example, in one section you have to align characters. Needless to say, if you take too long, they start to wander, which seriously makes things harder. Now, a lot of the puzzles in this game are thinkers. They require a good deal of thought. You can use your own judgment to solve some of them. If you make a mistake that gets you killed, well, it can be rectified. It can be done so quite easily. And then part of it is just the oddball humor that they threw into the game. I mean, you walk into one character's house and you're on a television show. And then you have the condescending way one character talks and the other one seems to, quote, not hear them clearly. Until you get that last statement at the end where he catches the words, and needless to say, there's a little double entendre there. Now, there is some very clever things that they did in this game, and it was one of those games that had an end-game hint system, but using them would cost you points to your total score. And some of the problems sometimes involved a lot of thinking and getting the right thing to the right person, which is very well done in my opinion. It prevents the character from being in a situation where they can't get out of, which is always, always a plus in my book. The last thing you want to do is, I mean, this is avoiding what some people call a soft lock in a game, in which you progress to a certain point, but because you don't have everything you need and you can't go back, you can't go, you basically lost the game. Practice that they steered away from as gaming progressed. Now, of course, part of Torin's passage is you've got a whole backstory that gets explained throughout the levels of the game. Who's this character? Who's this witch you're going after? Is she really the bad person? Is she being manipulated? The questions get answered as you play the game, and you get introduced to new characters. Like Torin will eventually have a budding love interest, which we will never see how that played out, because sadly things happened, and Sierra never got a chance to make more of the Torin's Passage games. So, I'd love to know what the full series would have been called had it been made into an entire playable storyline series. And I mean, there is only one way the story can play out, obviously. So there would be no, quote, playing things out to see how things were supposed to go. I mean, a lot of the games can have, early games could have certain endings, variations on the endings. We were just getting into a time when you could have a variety of different endings depending on your choices in the games. And Sierra had previously to this shown that you could carry over information from one game to another. But that's a whole different story, of course. That's a whole different series altogether. Torin's Passage was very good because you could have a bunch of jokes in there to break up the, quote, certain aspects of the game which could seem monotonous. I mean, if you wanted straight adventure, you had other games to go with. Here was an adventure with humor in it. I mean, one task that Torin must do is get past some skunks. But of course, you can't get near them if you don't have something to block your nose, and you can't get by them if you don't have something to protect you from their spray. So, and it'll end up helping you get to another point in the game, which is part of how it works. There's all sorts of humor. There's all sorts of off-kilter moments. Getting Having to get not dinosaur, dragon poo, which is actually it turns out to be very useful with another problem. But I'm not going to tell you how to solve the problems. I mean, it's a game you got to experience. It's in part for the laughter. I mean, actually, one of my favorite parts of the game, and when I showed it to my daughter years later, she found it very funny. Torin accident, I made a mistake to make Torin sort of dive into a peat bog. And his companion Boogle holds up a sign with a score on it, and your end message has something like, the scores and all that. And there were also other ties to other jokes and all that. It's a very good game to play, and you can learn from it. You can play it multiple times and enjoy it all the same. Puzzles require different ways of getting solved, like catching certain creatures using certain things, or a trading sequence where you have to acquire things from one person to get things from another person, and vice versa, before you get to the end of the sequence. Also, you have to there are some logic puzzles that you think that the simple answer is going to be the correct answer, but you tend to find out that it's not so simple. And it's actually quite fun, and there's a bit of humor in the game. Breaking the fourth wall at one point, because as Torin's moving along, he ends up knocking his head onto the game menu. So you have to get out of his way. But this is the humor that Al Lowell helped develop in games, and it's a joy to play the game with such humor in it, and such a crazy way to solve puzzles that sometimes make completely logical sense. I recommend you find and purchase Torin's Passage. It's a fun game to play. It's an experience you will thank yourselves for. If you love the Leisure Suit Larry games, I do recommend you play this because you'll find similar humor in it. Not to the extent that you'd have it in Leisure Suit Larry. If you're looking for a family fun game that you could share with the younger generations, this is it. This is the game. This is a fun game with an epic story with some pretty neat twists and turns in it. And I will admit, I enjoyed this game the first time I played it. It's a fun game to play again and again, especially if you are just trying to, do a complete run without losing any points, without needing any hints. And that's all I'm going to say on Torin's Passage. I invite you, of course, to watch the playthrough on my channel if you are so inclined. Of course, I will probably have this at the end of the playthrough too. But I also recommend go someplace like GOG to get it. I think it might even be up on Steam. Purchase the game, experience the game. If you love humor and you love adventure, this is definitely a good one. As always, take care. Check out some of the other videos on the channel. This is Rich Kale here on YouTube, Rich Gen X Elsewhere, signing off. Bye.